welcome to today's mini flow. Today I'm going to walk you through some of my feel-good go-tos. So these are poses that are helpful to relieve tension for certain things in the body, to find relaxation, things that will be useful in you when you're kind of wanting to wind down at the end of the day. So here's what we have today. I have 2 blocks, a blanket, a bolster, and I've also got a pair of yoga tune-up balls. So these are much like tennis balls. If you have tennis balls, they'll work just fine. The yoga tune-up balls are therapy balls that are just kind of a little bit more rubbery, a little bit more grippy. And I've got mine, they come in this handy little carrying case. So if you have tennis balls, those of you that have used them in class with me know that sometimes we'll just put them in a sock, tie off one end so that you've got a place to keep them together. So we're going to use these for the first couple of movements. So starting with a block on its flattest setting on the mat. And then the balls are actually going to come, I'm going to lay down, put my head on the balls on the block. So basically I want the balls to sit at the base of my skull. So the occipital kind of lobes here, think of that bottom point. So I'll just slowly come down into sort of a supported bridge position, my feet grounded, knees lifted or falling in together. So I bring my head back and then the balls under that base of the skull. So the balls are kind of centered on the block just so we're stable here and starting to settle in. So some of you know that I get a lot of headaches, and this is one way just to help kind of naturally relieve some of that pressure, some of that tension in the head. It's kind of getting some pressure on these spots. So I'm just going to wiggle it into that sweet spot right at the base of the skull and let a little weight settle in. Just a few breaths here in stillness. Feeling that gentle resistance. I'm starting to find a little movement. It's just kind of a tilt of the chin down and then looking up. So I'm just nodding my head slowly, getting that little bit of massage. Alright, so you can do that a few times. And then just a slight little turn to the right, slight little turn to the left. So it's not a whole big turn of the head, just a small movement to feel kind of that pressure point shift on the back of your head. Noticing if the ball starts to roll away, readjust. Good, and then I'm going to slowly lift my head, remove the balls, and set that block off to the side. So from here, we'll release the balls from, if you've got them in a sock or in a little holder. This will be our last movement with the balls. So if you don't have balls, stick with me. We're going to just start by putting these now under the trap. So when these balls come at the top of your spine here, right outside the spine, so you want to be like at least an inch out, and then kind of at the top here of your back, so that if I was looking down at you, I could almost see the balls kind of peeking up from the top of your shoulders. So I'm just going to wiggle those in here. I also have very tight traps. This is where I store a lot of tension, which sometimes limits my mobility in my neck. So it's a good place to relieve a little tension. So you just want to find that place where you can let some weight sink in again around those balls. Just using that little pressure point to release some tension. A few breaths here. You can always kind of wiggle and readjust if you feel like you're not really feeling much sensation. You should get to a point that's a little uncomfortable, just where we know we found those knots. Relaxing as much as possible, turning off the muscular effort. A few more breaths. Good. And then gently lift up just enough to pull those balls out. You can go ahead and set those off to the side. We're going to flip it around, coming to hands and knees. So a little bit of gentle movement here. Setting up for downward facing dog. So your fingers open against the mat. Tuck your toes under and send your hips up and back. Now anytime you come into downward dog, you can always kind of reposition as needed and take a little pedal out, dropping one heel as you bend the opposite knee. Checking in with the hamstrings, sensation behind the legs. Good, and then I like to take a little hip opener here. So you can lift one side, think of kicking up and across toward the opposite shoulder, allowing your hips to stack couple breaths here, lifting that knee. And then slowly coming back down, taking the second side, that lift and kick to open. A few breaths here. And then coming back to your downward facing dog. From here, take a little reach across. I'm gonna take my right hand back and across the outside of my left leg. You can reach toward your ankle, outside your thigh, wherever you can connect to, and take a little peek under that opposite armpit. So just getting a little bit of a twist. Just a few breaths here. And then taking the second side. So I'm gonna reach my left hand now outside my right leg, peek under the right armpit, still sinking into my heels, breathing into the back of my legs. Shifting forward and then slowly lowering back down to all fours. Coming to child's pose now. And I like to have blocks. So I'm gonna get my blocks handy at the top of my space on their flattest setting. So as you find child's pose, knees can come open, big toes to touch, shifting hips to heels, and forehead down. So if you want a little bit more of that stretch through your side bodies, through your armpits, your palms come onto the blocks, a little more elevation as your head drops. And really just breathe into that space along your side ribs. Think of relaxing the arms. A few slow breaths here. Now you can always readjust as needed if you want to wiggle your hips back a little further. Really sink heavy, letting your belly drop. Last breath. And then carefully coming forward to set up for our final restorative posture. I'm going to use my blocks to support the bolster in a ramp. So flattest height and middle height for those blocks. As I take my bolster and just lean it up into that ramp position. So a lot of you have also done this with me in classes. One of my favorite restorative postures. We'll use a blanket as well if you've got one. So you want to roll it into this nice long roll here as you bring your tailbone up to the edge of that bolster and wrapping the blanket so that you have it over your feet and around, tucking behind your ankles. As the knees open up to find Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose, the blanket just helps to support you from collapsing all the way open, so you have a little of that extra support. And then you can lean back, finding a heart opener on this supportive ramp. Letting your arms drop open, your palms face up, and just starting to soften. Back side of the body gets heavy, knees naturally draw open. And just taking a few slow, full breaths here. This is a restorative posture, so we'll typically stay here 5 to 7 minutes, maybe even more. So stay here as long as you like. Go ahead and start to come out. So guiding my knees back together gently, carefully coming back up to a seat. Take time for your transition, for what you need today. And if there's anything else that would feel good, take some time to explore, to find a gentle stretch, and just close out your practice. Thanks for joining me.